Welcome to Daikin web-based training. This course will provide you with the opportunity to learn about the appropriate procedures for additional refrigerant charge when newly installing R410A Sky Air units. In this course, we will learn about 1. When additional refrigerant charge is necessary. 2. Preparation. 3. Procedures for additional refrigerant charge. When the length of the refrigerant piping installed on site exceeds the chargeless piping length, additional refrigerant must be charged. If an incorrect amount of refrigerant is charged, it can lead to a gas shortage or overcharge and cause an abnormal shutdown or even a breakdown. Therefore, be sure to charge the correct amount of refrigerant by following the proper procedures. This is the entire workflow when newly installing an air conditioner. The additional refrigerant charge is to be conducted after vacuum drying. Before initiating the refrigerant charge, it is important to confirm that you have the necessary equipment and tools. Shown in the slide are the pieces of equipment and tools used when charging additional refrigerant. 1. The hexagonal wrenches, valve key, and flathead screwdriver are used for opening or closing the outdoor unit's stop valve. 2. The R410A refrigerant is for the additional charge. 3. The digital scale is for measuring the refrigerant charging amount. 4. The gauge manifold and charge hoses are used to measure pressure and open or close the refrigerant circuit. 5. The charge valve is used to prevent refrigerant leakage. And 6. The vacuum pump is used to remove the air in the gauge manifold and charge hoses. Use a vacuum pump that has an oil check valve. This is to prevent the backflow of the refrigerant oil in the vacuum pump into the air conditioner. Next, obtain the amount of refrigerant to be charged based on the size and length of the liquid side refrigerant piping. Sometimes the air conditioner has already been charged with refrigerant at shipment for a certain length of piping. Therefore, it is necessary to calculate the amount of additional refrigerant for the length obtained by subtracting this certain length from the total liquid piping length. Once the amount of refrigerant necessary for the additional charge has been determined, use a cylinder that contains that amount of refrigerant. Be sure to use a cylinder that contains a sufficient amount of refrigerant in order to avoid running out of refrigerant halfway through the charge. Next, let's go over the points that you need to know about refrigerant cylinders. Be sure to confirm the refrigerant type with the lettering, coloring, and the like. In the case of Japan, for example, a pink color is used to distinguish an R410A cylinder from other types of refrigerant cylinders. And R410A must be charged in a liquid state. A refrigerant cylinder is equipped with a siphon in order to enable easy charging with the refrigerant in a liquid state and the cylinder in an upright position. A cylinder with a siphon has a sticker attached to it. When using a cylinder without a siphon, charge the refrigerant while keeping the cylinder upside down. Why is it necessary to charge R410A in a liquid state? R410A is made of two types of refrigerant, R32 and R125. The graph on the right shows the saturation curves for R32 and R125. The horizontal axis represents temperature and the vertical axis represents pressure. The evaporation temperatures are different for R32 and R125. When the refrigerant is charged to an air conditioner in a liquid state, its composition or mixing ratio stays the same, at 50-50. However, if it is charged in a gas state, the mixing ratio is altered by evaporation, as R32 has a lower evaporation temperature and evaporates more than R125. Therefore, be sure to charge the refrigerant in a liquid state when using R410A. Do not use a charging cylinder because its structure is such that it will inevitably release refrigerant into the atmosphere while charging. Instead, always use a digital scale. Now, let's look at the procedures for additional refrigerant charge. We will start from the procedure after vacuum drying of the indoor unit and refrigerant piping has been completed. The refrigerant charge must always be conducted while making sure that the refrigerant gas does not leak from the refrigerant piping and that no air enters it. The connection is to be changed for the refrigerant charge after the indoor unit and refrigerant piping have been vacuum dried. First, close all the valves. As shown in the slide, the charge valve closes when it is turned counterclockwise. Next, detach the charge hose from the gas side service port. Detach the charge valve from the gas side service port and put the service port cap on. As shown in the photo, the gas side service port is located on the larger piping. Then, connect the refrigerant cylinder to the gauge manifold's common connection port. Connect the vacuum pump to the gauge manifold's low-pressure side connection port. Leave the gauge manifold's high-pressure side connection port and liquid side service port as is. The refrigerant must be charged in a liquid state from the liquid side service port. Why is it necessary to charge the refrigerant from the liquid side service port? As shown in the slide, if the liquid refrigerant is charged from the gas side service port, during cooling operation, the liquid refrigerant enters the compressor almost immediately. This can cause the compressor to compress the liquid refrigerant and result in a breakdown. Therefore, be sure to always charge from the liquid side service port. There is air in the hose and gauge manifold that have just been attached. If the refrigerant is charged in this state, air will mix with it. This will have an adverse effect on the air conditioner. Now, let's look at the procedure as to how to remove the air. 1. Leave the charge valve and refrigerant cylinder valve closed. 2. Open the gauge manifold's low-pressure side valve. 3. Turn on the vacuum pump to remove the air from the hose. 4. Once the low-pressure side pressure gauge reads minus 14.5 psi, 5. Open the high-pressure side valve. Then, 6. Close the low-pressure side valve. 7. Lastly, turn off the vacuum pump. This allows for the air to be removed from the hose and gauge manifold. Next, let's take a look at the refrigerant charge operation. 1. First, reset the digital scale to 0 after placing the cylinder on it. 2. Next, open the cylinder valve. At this point in time, close the gauge manifold's low-pressure side valve and leave the high-pressure side valve open. 3. Open the charge valve. Due to the pressure difference with the cylinder, the refrigerant is charged into the refrigerant piping and indoor unit, which are both in a vacuum state. 4. Once the specified amount has been charged, 5. Close the cylinder valve. However, the pressure in the cylinder and that in the indoor unit and refrigerant piping may become equal halfway through the charging process. This means that there is no pressure difference and the refrigerant amount initially calculated cannot be charged. If this occurs, charge the refrigerant while operating in cooling mode. We will look at this procedure shortly. Let's now look at the procedure after the specified amount of refrigerant has been charged. At this point, when the specified amount of refrigerant has been fully charged, there is still refrigerant remaining in the hose. We will go over the procedure for recovering this refrigerant next. Let's now look at the procedure to recover the refrigerant left in the hose during the additional charge operation into the air conditioner. 1. Open the stop valves on both the liquid and gas sides using hexagonal wrenches. 2. Turn on the air conditioner. 3. Close the liquid side stop valve while the air conditioner is on. The pump down operation is initiated at this point in time. 4. Once the high pressure side pressure gauge drops near 0 psi. 5. Close the charge valve. 6. Open the liquid side stop valve. And 7. Turn off the air conditioner immediately. 8. Detach the hoses, gauge manifold, cylinder, vacuum pump, and hexagonal wrenches. And be sure to put the caps on the service ports and stop valves. This completes the additional refrigerant charge. Let's now look at the procedure when the pressure in the cylinder and that in the indoor unit and refrigerant piping become equal, and the refrigerant amount initially calculated cannot be charged. Under the same conditions where refrigerant is being charged, 1. Open the stop valves on both the liquid and gas sides. 2. Turn on the air conditioner. 3. Close the liquid side stop valve. Since this causes a pressure drop on the low pressure side, the refrigerant will be charged into the refrigerant piping and indoor unit through the liquid side service port. 4. Once the specified amount has been charged, 5. Close the cylinder valve. 6. Once the pressure gauge drops near 0 psi, 7. Close the charge valve. 8. Open the liquid side stop valve. 9. Turn off the air conditioner. Detach the hoses, gauge manifold, cylinder, vacuum pump, and hexagonal wrenches. And be sure to put the caps on the service ports and stop valves. This completes the additional refrigerant charge. Lastly, be sure to record the additional charging amount on the caution label on the back of the external casing of the outdoor unit. If this is not done, a service person will be unable to charge the correct amount of additional refrigerant after conducting repairs. Even if no additional refrigerant is charged, record it as £0.